This is the real case of Timothy Pitson, 2011, Illinois, USA. Comment below which city and country you're watching from. There's something profoundly unsettling about a child's smile caught just before they vanish. A photograph of 6-year-old Timothy Pitson, wearing his little Spider-Man backpack and flashing a grin that screams innocence, has haunted the internet for over a decade. It was May 11, 2011, a seemingly ordinary spring morning in Aurora, Illinois. Birds chirping, parents rushing, and children streaming into schoolyards. But for Timothy, it was the last morning anyone would ever see him. His mother, Amy Fry Pitson, walked calmly into Greenman Elementary, signed him out of class with a fabricated excuse, a family emergency, she claimed, and walked out the door hand in hand with her son. It would be the beginning of one of America's most perplexing and emotionally devastating missing child cases. At first, it felt like a whimsical escape. Amy took Timothy to the zoo. They rode the carousel. He smiled in photos, surrounded by animals and sunshine. Then they went to a water park resort in Gurnee, Illinois. To the outside world, it seemed like a mother and son on a spontaneous adventure. Hotel security cameras captured them checking in, walking the halls, splashing in the pool. There were no signs of distress, no cries for help. Just a little boy who believed he was on a surprise vacation, one of those magical getaways that kids remember forever. Except no one knew it would be the last chapter in his life, we could confirm. 3 days after signing Timothy out of school, Amy was found dead in a Rockford motel room. An apparent suicide. She had slit her wrists and taken an overdose of antihistamines. Her body was discovered on May 14, 2011, alone on a blood-stained bed. Her driver's license and a suicide note placed carefully beside her. That note, just one paragraph long, was chilling. In it, Amy claimed that Timothy was safe, being cared for by someone who loved him, and "you will never find him." No explanation, no clues. Just the cold declaration of a vanishing act that tore through the hearts of everyone who read it. Investigators combed through her movements, GPS data, toll records, surveillance footage. They retraced her route across northern Illinois and southern Wisconsin. They discovered that between the last known sighting of Timothy and her death, Amy had made several mysterious stops: a grocery store, a gas station, even a repair shop. But not once was Timothy captured on camera after that final hotel checkout. It was as if he had been swallowed whole by the landscape, erased from existence with precision. No body, no cries, no ransom, no final goodbye. Just a vanishing child, and a mother's cryptic goodbye. How do you make sense of a mystery like this? A smiling child disappears. A mother dies by suicide. A note promises safety, but guarantees no return. Law enforcement, grief-stricken family members, internet sleuths, and the media would all descend into the rabbit hole of Timothy's final days. Was Amy telling the truth? Did she give her son to someone else? Or was the note a cover-up for something far darker? 13 years later, the questions still burn. But we start at the only place we can, the moment a mother took her son's hand and walked into oblivion. As investigators began unraveling the chaotic thread of Amy Fry Pitson's final days, they quickly discovered a trail that was both maddeningly detailed and heartbreakingly incomplete. Every movement she made was scrutinized: credit card swipes, hotel bookings, gas station stops, security footage, timestamps. In just 72 hours, Amy had managed to crisscross state lines and create what felt like a carefully constructed puzzle, but with several critical pieces forever missing. On May 11th, shortly after removing Timothy from school, she drove to Brookfield Zoo in suburban Chicago. Surveillance footage showed the pair entering the gates, walking hand in hand, the boy beaming with excitement. He had no idea he was entering the last recorded hours of his documented life. That afternoon, Amy contacted her husband's brother, saying everything was fine. There was no panic in her voice, no trace of distress. The next day, she booked a room at Key Lime Cove Resort, a massive indoor water park in Gurney. Once again, hotel cameras caught images of a carefree Timothy, laughing, swimming, wrapped in towels, sipping juice from a plastic cup. It looked like any other family trip. But behind Amy's smile, something darker churned. She wasn't just escaping, she was orchestrating a vanishing. On May 13th, Amy checked into a cheap motel in Sullivan, Illinois, over 150 miles away. This time, there was no sign of Timothy. Alone, she called several friends and family members throughout the day. Most of them said she sounded normal, even upbeat. But one call stood out. She told one friend, "Timothy belongs to me. No one will ever hurt him again." That cryptic phrase would become central to the case. What did she mean by hurt? Was she referring to her tumultuous marriage with Timothy's father, Jim? Or something else entirely? That same evening, Amy was seen on camera at a Family Dollar store in Winnebago, then again at a nearby gas station. She appeared calm, purposeful. She bought pens, notepaper, and envelopes, materials for her suicide note. In the final footage of Amy alive, she entered the Rockford Inn, carrying a plastic bag and wearing her usual gray hoodie. She checked into room 108, where she would end her life just hours later. A housekeeper discovered her the next morning, her lifeless body laid out neatly, the room strangely tidy for such a tragic scene. But the horror wasn't just in the act, it was in what wasn't there. Timothy was gone. His clothes, toys, backpack, missing. No blood, no struggle, no signs of foul play. The only clues were in Amy's car, which had been parked outside the motel. A trace amount of blood in the back seat, later confirmed to be Timothy's. Not enough to indicate serious injury, but enough to raise alarm. His car seat was gone. His favorite toy, a green toy car he rarely let go of, had vanished with him. Investigators were stunned by the contradiction. If Amy had truly wanted to harm her son, why the elaborate road trip? Why the note assuring his safety? And why no evidence of violence? Some believed she had arranged for Timothy to be hidden with someone she trusted, perhaps to protect him from a life she feared would destroy him. Others feared a more tragic outcome, that she couldn't live with herself and couldn't let him live either. Back at home, Jim Pitson was thrust into a nightmare he couldn't escape. One moment he was a father planning his son's next birthday party. The next, he was answering the door to police officers telling him his wife was dead and his son was missing. His life fractured into two halves before May 11, 2011, and every agonizing day since. And as the days turned into weeks and the weeks into years, Timothy's name would become a symbol, a mystery, a ghost that hovered over the state of Illinois and far beyond. What do you do when the trail ends and all that's left is silence? That's the paralyzing reality investigators faced after Amy Fry Pitson's body was found and Timothy had simply vanished. There was no note addressed directly to her husband, no instructions for authorities, no coordinates to follow, just the haunting sentence: Timothy is safe. He is with people who will care for him. You will never find him. That last part hit like a knife. It didn't say, "Don't try." It said, "You will never." The statement was final. And with it, Amy had created a psychological prison for everyone who loved Timothy, trapped between hope and horror, faith and dread. The days immediately following her death were consumed by a desperate search. Authorities worked around the clock, tracing Amy's route with military precision. Her cell phone records, bank activity, toll receipts, all mapped out a zigzag across Illinois and into parts of Wisconsin. Drones were deployed. Search dogs combed wooded areas. Bodies of water were checked. Nothing. It was as if Timothy had been airlifted off the face of the earth. No one saw him after May 13th. Not a neighbor, Not a camera, not a cashier. The digital footprint simply stopped. Still, investigators clung to the belief that if Amy said he was safe, there had to be someone else involved. She had nearly 24 hours unaccounted for between her last confirmed sighting with Timothy and her death. Did she hand him over to someone during that time? A friend? A distant relative? A stranger she met online? The FBI and local police began quietly investigating every known associate of Amy's. Former co-workers, childhood friends, even distant cousins. Hundreds of interviews. Thousands of hours of manpower. No one knew anything. Or if they did, they weren't talking. Meanwhile, forensic teams analyzed Amy's car, trying to extract meaning from microscopic clues. Soil samples found under the vehicle led investigators to believe it had been parked in a rural, grassy area with wildflowers, likely near a gravel road. That led to an extensive search of secluded regions in northwest Illinois, particularly near Sterling and Dixon. Helicopters scanned fields. Volunteers searched barns and abandoned structures. Yet no items linked to Timothy were ever recovered, not even a sock. It was a ghost chase. And then came the blood. A small, barely visible smear in the rear seat of Amy's 2004 Ford Expedition. It was tested and confirmed to be Timothy's. But it was old, possibly from a nosebleed or minor injury days before the trip. Investigators were cautious not to jump to conclusions, but it raised the terrifying possibility that something more sinister had happened. If he was safe, why was there blood? If she left him with someone, why did she lie so absolutely? Jim Pitson, clinging to hope, appeared before the press multiple times. His voice would crack as he pleaded, "If anyone out there has my son, please, just let me know he's okay." But the press conferences brought no new leads, only more questions. Timothy's image, big brown eyes, and that ever-present smile, was broadcast across the country. Billboards went up. Amber alerts were shared. Tips poured in from across the U.S., but none led anywhere. Every lead, a dead end. Every glimmer of hope, another crushing disappointment. The community of Aurora, once tight-knit and sleepy, was gripped by a mixture of grief and confusion. How could a mother take her own life but leave behind the enigma of her missing child? Why go to such lengths? Days of travel, hotel stays, amusement parks, only to vanish him from reality. Parents held their children closer. Schools added extra security. And slowly, a sense of unease settled over the town. Because if a boy like Timothy Pitson could disappear without a trace, then no one was truly safe. Not even in the heartland. Jim Pitson was not just grieving. He was unraveling. Each sunrise without his son was another brick laid in the slow-building prison of unanswered questions. He would sit in Timothy's empty bedroom for hours, clutching a toy car or a photograph, willing the silence to break. The quiet was the worst part. No leads, no calls, no ransom. Just nothing. For the first few days after Amy's death, he had hoped, clung desperately to her words in that suicide note, "Timothy is safe." But hope, when fed nothing, quickly turns cruel. Jim had always known Amy struggled emotionally. She had battled depression for years, and their marriage had suffered under that weight. There were fights, separations, reconciliations. But he never imagined she was capable of this. Not of taking Timothy, not of vanishing him, and certainly not of dying alone in a motel room, leaving behind a cryptic farewell like a riddle meant to haunt him forever. "I thought I knew her," he would later say in interviews, "but I didn't know this version of her." As detectives continued to analyze every scrap of Amy's final movements, Jim was forced to live publicly through the darkest chapter of his life. The media hounded him. Was he involved? Did he know more than he let on? Was this a custody dispute gone off the rails? Though police publicly cleared him, the court of public opinion whispered, and that whisper echoed in every supermarket aisle and schoolyard he passed through. But he never lashed out. he kept his composure. Because above all, he needed to stay strong in case, just in case, Timothy came back. Theories began to bubble up online. Some speculated that Amy had joined a cult and hidden Timothy within it. Others insisted she had carefully rehomed him with someone off-grid, in a community that didn't believe in documentation or modern surveillance. A few darker voices argued that Timothy was dead, and the note was just a guilt-washed lie meant to give her family false comfort. The case became a magnet for conspiracy theorists, amateur sleuths, and true crime fanatics. People examined every frame of footage, every line of the note, every step she took in those 72 hours. Theories flourished. Facts remained scarce. One persistent theory emerged from Amy's known fears. She had, on multiple occasions, expressed concern that Timothy would be harmed in the midst of their volatile marriage. Friends remembered her saying things like, "If I ever felt he was in danger, I'd do something drastic." Those statements, viewed in hindsight, took on terrifying new meanings. Had she genuinely believed she was saving Timothy from a life of trauma? Had she found someone she believed could offer a better future? Or had her mind, fractured and distorted, taken her somewhere far darker? In the months that followed, Jim poured his grief into advocacy. He spoke at events for missing children. He partnered with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. He kept Timothy's name alive in the news, even when others moved on. Every birthday passed like a funeral. No candles, no laughter, just a number increasing while time refused to answer back. "He'd be 12 today," Jim once whispered to a news camera. "What does a 12-year-old like these days? I don't even know anymore." What made it all worse was that there was no closure, no body to bury, no finality, just this gaping hole in the world where a little boy once was. That absence, that cruel ambiguity, was what made the case different. Most tragedies end with a truth, a resolution. But for Jim, and for the world watching, Timothy was both alive and dead, present and gone, hope and despair. And the question that refused to die was the same one Jim asked himself every single morning. Where is my son? In the years following Timothy Pitson's disappearance, the story refused to fade. It lingered like smoke, visible, traceable, but always slipping through fingers. And as with any case that captures national attention, it attracted the shadows. Imposters, hoaxes, and people desperate to become part of a tragedy they didn't live. The most painful blow came in April 2019, 8 long years after Timothy vanished, when a disheveled teenager was found wandering the streets of Newport, Kentucky. He claimed to be Timothy. He said he had just escaped from his kidnappers, men who had held him captive in a Red Roof Inn for years. The news exploded. Reporters flooded the streets. Jim Pitson received a call he had imagined thousands of times but had never truly believed would come. "We think we found your son." His heart stopped. The boy looked the right age. He had a vague resemblance. Law enforcement brought him in. He told a story full of horror. Chains, locked doors, years of silence and abuse. He cried. He said he just wanted to go home. For a brief, fragile moment the world believed. But the DNA test told the truth. The boy was not Timothy Pitson. He was a 23-year-old man named Brian Michael Rinne, a troubled adult with a history of mental illness and a disturbing fascination with abducted children. When the results came back, Jim was shattered all over again. "It's like losing him twice," he told reporters, barely holding back tears. Rinne was later sentenced to federal prison for making false statements, but that hardly mattered. The damage was done. That flicker of light had been extinguished. Again. And this wasn't the first false lead. Over the years, dozens of sightings were reported. A boy matching Timothy's description at a rest stop in Ohio. A teenager asking for help in Canada. An anonymous letter claiming knowledge of his location in Mexico. Each one investigated, each one debunked. Every lead became an emotional landmine, especially for Jim, because even when the rational mind says, "It's probably nothing," the heart always says, "But what if it's him this time?" Meanwhile, Timothy's photo continued to age. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children released several age-progressed images over the years, composite renderings of what he might look like at 8, 10, 13, and later 18. Each one like a phantom sketch of a life that might have been. The photos were circulated on missing persons posters, news segments, social media campaigns. But none sparked the miracle moment everyone hoped for. No teacher said, "That boy is in my class." No neighbor said, "He lives down the street." The world remained silent, and as time wore on, the mystery calcified. It became legend, a modern ghost story told in hushed tones on podcasts and documentaries. The boy whose mother hid him. The child swallowed by the Midwest. Some believed he was raised under a new name, never knowing who he truly was. Others suspected something more grim, that Amy had lied in her note to mask a darker truth. But the lack of evidence, of any evidence, kept the debate alive. Because there is no closure when the door was never closed. Jim, meanwhile, refused to stop searching. He kept Timothy's bedroom untouched, every piece of clothing, every toy in place. "Just in case he comes back one day," he'd say. Holidays became unbearable. The quietest sound, footsteps outside, a knock at the door, was enough to make his heart race, just for a second, just in case. Because hope, no matter how wounded, doesn't die quietly. It stays, it waits, and it whispers. Maybe today. To understand the mystery of Timothy Pitson, one must look deeper into the woman who orchestrated it all. Amy Fry Pitson. Because the truth is, this wasn't a story that began on May 11, 2011. It was just the final act of a much longer play, one filled with red flags, private despair, and moments of quiet desperation that too many people only saw clearly in hindsight. Amy was, by many accounts, a loving mother. She doted on Timothy. Friends described her as warm, nurturing, even playful. But there was always something underneath, something raw and unstable, especially in the months leading up to her disappearance. She had a long history of mental health struggles, depression, anxiety, hospitalizations. At one point, she even attempted suicide before years earlier, while Timothy was still a baby. That incident was hidden, quieted, brushed aside as a momentary break. But it lingered. And her marriage to Jim was marked by turbulence, arguments, temporary separations, custody threats. Family members recalled Amy's growing fear that Timothy would be taken from her if the marriage dissolved permanently. To those close to her, it became increasingly clear. Amy was not just struggling, she was losing control. In the months before the disappearance, Amy's mental state appeared to deteriorate rapidly. She withdrew from friends. Her texts became erratic. She began to express paranoia, that Timothy wasn't safe, that people were trying to harm him. In one particularly chilling conversation with a close friend, she said, "If they take him from me, I'll make sure no one gets him." It was brushed off at the time, a mother venting under pressure. But after May 2011, those words would return like thunder. Amy also had a peculiar relationship with control. When life began to spiral, when she felt cornered, she had a tendency to run. Literally. There were short disappearances, long drives with no destination. It was her coping mechanism. But in hindsight, those impulsive retreats feel like test runs for something bigger, something final. And when she checked Timothy out of school on that fateful morning, it wasn't an impulsive move. It was calculated. It had structure. She brought his medical records with her. She packed multiple outfits. She turned off her phone for hours at a time to avoid being tracked. This was not a breakdown. It was an operation. Psychologists who later reviewed the case speculated about a phenomenon called altruistic filicide, a rare but documented behavior in which a parent, often suffering from severe mental illness, kills their child under the belief they are protecting them from future harm. But Amy didn't leave a grieving note. She didn't express sorrow. She claimed he was safe and with someone who loves him. Was it a lie? Or did she truly believe it? If Amy had made a secret arrangement to place Timothy with someone, that person would have to be completely off the grid. No contact, no slip-ups, no paper trail. For over a decade, not a single person has come forward with credible evidence. No anonymous tip. No confession. Nothing to suggest that a shadow guardian is out there raising a boy who doesn't know who he really is. And yet, the idea persists. Because to accept the alternative is to accept that Amy's final gift to her son may have been a nightmare disguised as mercy. Jim has often said he doesn't hate Amy. He grieves for her, too. She wasn't a monster, he once told a reporter. She was sick, and she didn't ask for help. That quote sits heavy, because it reveals the painful paradox of this entire case. Love and mental illness, care and chaos, motherhood and destruction, all colliding in one unthinkable decision. A mother trying to save her son, a father left to chase ghosts, and a child, sweet, smiling Timothy, lost somewhere between the two. Each year on October 18th, Jim Pitson lights a single candle. He doesn't throw parties anymore. There are no balloons, no cake filled with candles, no wrapping paper scattered across the floor. Instead, he marks Timothy's birthday quietly, alone or with a few family members, sometimes with a prayer, sometimes with just silence. "I don't celebrate it," he said once, eyes full of weight. "I survive it." Because for 13 years now, Timothy has grown older only in theory, in digital renderings, in imagined conversations, in empty chairs at dinner tables. 13 birthdays have passed, each one another cruel reminder that the world kept spinning. But Timothy never came home. In the public eye, the Pitson case has transformed from a breaking news story to a kind of modern myth, fuel for documentaries, YouTube deep dives, and Reddit theories that spiral into obsession. Every few years, a new podcast or TV show resurrects the story, repackaging the mystery for a new generation. But for those closest to it, the media spotlight is a double-edged sword. It keeps Timothy's name alive, yes, but it also reopens wounds that never fully closed. Every headline, "Vanished without a trace," "The boy no one could find," is a fresh echo of absence, a reminder that the mystery is still unsolved. The police, too, have remained quietly committed to the case, even if the trail has long since gone cold. There's no active task force, no new leads in years, but the file is still open. Timothy's DNA and dental records are in every national and international database. His fingerprints are registered. His photo is age-progressed every few years by forensic artists who build faces from possibilities. But possibility is not proof. And every time a new image is released, Jim studies it like a man trying to see through fog. "Would I even recognize him now?" he's asked. "I hope so," he always replies. Meanwhile, life moves on in Aurora, Illinois. The town where Timothy once rode his bike and played in the park has changed. The school he left that day has seen new generations of students come and go. Teachers remember him as bright, curious, kind, a boy who loved science and always had a question to ask. His classmates, now in their late teens, have graduated high school. Some have gone to college. A few have started families of their own. But when you mention Timothy's name, the air changes. Time may pass, but the wound remains. There's something uniquely cruel about a mystery without resolution. When someone dies, there is mourning, burial, finality. But when someone vanishes, grief becomes a cycle, open-ended, unrelenting. For Jim, it's a daily ritual of wondering. Is he alive? Is he safe? Does he even know who he is? The questions aren't rhetorical. They are survival. Holding on to them means holding on to hope. Letting go means surrendering to the dark. And yet, Jim has managed to live. Not move on, but live. He returned to work. He began speaking publicly, mostly to advocate for families of missing children. He shares advice, pain, and encouragement, but he never says goodbye. "I don't care how long it takes," he said. "Even if it's 20 years, I'll still be looking. I'll still be waiting." That stubborn faith is what's left when everything else has been taken. It's what keeps him going through every false lead, every tip that ends in disappointment, every passing year. Timothy Pitson's story is not just about a missing boy. It's about endurance, about the quiet, brutal persistence of hope in the face of silence. It's about a father who refuses to stop asking the question that no one has been able to answer. Not yet. Where is Timothy? Everywhere Jim Pitson goes, he scans the crowd. A grocery store, a football game, even a busy airport terminal. It doesn't matter. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he's always searching. A glimpse of a familiar walk, the curve of a cheekbone, the sound of a voice in a certain key. It's irrational, he knows that. Timothy would look nothing like the little boy who vanished in 2011. He'd be taller now, his face sharper, maybe even carrying himself differently. But that's the thing about grief fused with hope. It turns every stranger into a potential miracle. Every crowd holds a ghost. Jim's experience is not unique. Families of missing children live in a state of suspended reality. They're trapped in two parallel timelines, one where the child is gone, and one where they are just one step, one sighting, one headline away from return. There are support groups full of parents just like Jim. Parents who've kept bedrooms untouched for decades. Parents who still send birthday cards to post office boxes that no longer exist. Parents who measure time not in years, but in missed Christmases, missed school plays, missed good nights. Timothy's case, however, has taken on a life of its own. It became something larger than the tragedy itself. A cultural riddle. A story that people tell when they want to explain how someone can vanish without a trace in the age of omnipresent technology. No pings, no footprints, no cameras catching a slip. It defies logic. And in doing so, it evokes fear. Because if it can happen to Timothy, it can happen to anyone. A single decision, one moment of trust, and the world shifts beneath you. His name has become a trigger in public discourse, a case study for law enforcement training, the subject of psychology courses on trauma and loss. Documentaries often include Timothy's story as part of larger narratives on parental abduction and mental illness. And yet none of these retellings bring resolution. They only reframe the pain, over and over from new angles, with sharper music and better lighting. But still, the core remains unchanged. A child is missing, and no one knows where he is. Some believe Timothy may no longer be in the country, that Amy found a way to smuggle him across a border, perhaps with fake documents, and leave him in a community where he could disappear among the living. Others suggest she left him with someone she met in a hospital during one of her psychiatric stays, someone off the grid, someone who promised anonymity. These theories sound wild, but in the vacuum of answers, wild becomes acceptable, possible, even hopeful. There's a small wooden box in Jim's living room. Inside it are fragments of a life paused, a tiny shoe, a report card, a drawing of a house and stick figure parents. "Me and Mommy and Daddy," it says. The handwriting is shaky, the spelling imperfect. It's the last thing Timothy ever drew before Amy took him from school that morning. Jim found it weeks after, tucked behind a dresser. And every time he opens that box, the same wave returns. Grief, anger, guilt, and love all crashing together. But Jim also knows that while the world sees a mystery, he sees a son. A boy who loved swimming, who had a laugh that could fill a room, who once said, "When I grow up, I want to be a detective, so I can find lost puppies." That memory lives in Jim like a heartbeat. It's what fuels him when hope grows thin. It's what keeps him fighting past the disbelief, the silence, the pain. Because until someone proves otherwise, Timothy Pitson is not gone. He is waiting. Somewhere. Time is relentless. It moves forward, whether we're ready or not. And in the case of Timothy Pitson, time has done something especially cruel. It has allowed the world to grow older while he remains frozen in memory. Always 6 years old, always smiling in that zoo photo, always wearing his little backpack, unaware of the storm that was about to consume his life. In the years since his disappearance, his friends have become adults. They've gone to college, gotten jobs, started families. But Timothy exists only in echoes, in retellings, in images altered by forensic artists trying to predict what a boy might look like if he had the chance to become a man. For Jim, that disconnect is devastating. "I don't even know what he sounds like now," he once admitted. "I don't know if his voice would be deep or if he'd still have that giggle." That's the horror of this kind of loss. It doesn't just take your child. It takes all the versions of them that should have existed. Birthdays come and go like haunted anniversaries, each one marking what could have been. The start of middle school, a driver's license, prom night. And yet, all Jim has are 6 years of memories on repeat. Public interest in the case spikes in waves. A new documentary, a resurfaced photo, a viral post on social media. Suddenly the world remembers again. Theories resurface, questions ignite. People share the story as a warning, a mystery, a tragedy that refuses to be forgotten. But for those at the center, Jim, Amy's family, law enforcement, it never went away. It lives with them day and night. For them, there is no true crime fascination, no entertainment value. There is only the weight of not knowing. One of the most agonizing truths about Timothy's disappearance is how cleanly it was executed. There were no mistakes, no digital breadcrumb, no suspicious phone call caught on wiretap. Amy planned this with a precision that defies the image many had of her as a fragile, impulsive woman. She knew how to disappear a child, and that knowledge is what keeps investigators awake at night. Because the very idea that someone could remove a child from the system so thoroughly, with no money, no criminal connections, and no sophisticated tools, terrifies them. It means it could happen again, and again. The psychological impact of this case is massive. For law enforcement, it's a reminder of how fragile even the most well-documented lives can be. For parents, it's a shadow that creeps in during moments of vulnerability. For advocates of mental health reform, it is a devastating example of what happens when intervention comes too late. Amy was crying for help for years, and no one heard her in time. Timothy's vanishing was not just a family tragedy. It was a societal failure. And still, there is the note. That single-page message left by Amy. "Timothy is safe. He is with people who will care for him. You will never find him." 13 words that have dictated the direction of an entire investigation. Words that could be the truth, or a carefully constructed lie to mask an unspeakable act. That sentence has been read, analyzed, and debated by FBI profilers, therapists, journalists, and armchair detectives alike. But none of them can say for sure what it really meant. Amy took the truth with her, and she sealed it in silence. But despite the years, despite the pain, despite the infinite unknowns, Jim Pitson still holds on. Not because he's naive, not because he's in denial, but because sometimes hope is the only thing left that isn't broken. "Until someone shows me he's gone," he says. "I believe he's out there. I have to." Time is relentless. It moves forward whether we're ready or not. And in the case of Timothy Pitson, time has done something especially cruel. It has allowed the world to grow older while he remains frozen in memory. Always 6 years old. Always smiling in that zoo photo. Always wearing his little backpack, unaware of the storm that was about to consume his life. In the years since his disappearance, his friends have become adults. They've gone to college, gotten jobs, started families. But Timothy exists only in echoes, in retellings, in images altered by forensic artists trying to predict what a boy might look like if he had the chance to become a man. For Jim, that disconnect is devastating. "I don't even know what he sounds like now," he once admitted. "I don't know if his voice would be deep, or if he'd still have that giggle." That's the horror of this kind of loss. It doesn't just take your child. It takes all the versions of them that should have existed. Birthdays come and go like haunted anniversaries, each one marking what could have been. The start of middle school, a driver's license, prom night. And yet, all Jim has are 6 years of memories on repeat. Public interest in the case spikes in waves. A new documentary, a resurfaced photo, a viral post on social media. Suddenly, the world remembers again. Theories resurface, questions ignite. People share the story as a warning, a mystery, a tragedy that refuses to be forgotten. But for those at the center, Jim, Amy's family, law enforcement, it never went away. It lives with them, day and night. For them, there is no true crime fascination, no entertainment value. There is only the weight of not knowing. One of the most agonizing truths about Timothy's disappearance is how cleanly it was executed. There were no mistakes, no digital breadcrumb, no suspicious phone call caught on wiretap. Amy planned this with a precision that defies the image many had of her as a fragile, impulsive woman. She knew how to disappear a child, and that knowledge is what keeps investigators awake at night. Because the very idea that someone could remove a child from the system so thoroughly, with no money, no criminal connections, and no sophisticated tools, terrifies them. It means it could happen again and again. The psychological impact of this case is massive. For law enforcement, it's a reminder of how fragile even the most well-documented lives can be. For parents, it's a shadow that creeps in during moments of vulnerability. For advocates of mental health reform, it is a devastating example of what happens when intervention comes too late. Amy was crying for help for years, and no one heard her in time. Timothy's vanishing was not just a family tragedy. It was a societal failure. And still, there is the note, that single-page message left by Amy. Timothy is safe. He is with people who will care for him. You will never find him. 13 words that have dictated the direction of an entire investigation. Words that could be the truth, or a carefully constructed lie to mask an unspeakable act. That sentence has been read, analyzed, and debated by FBI profilers, therapists, journalists, and armchair detectives alike. But none of them can say for sure what it really meant. Amy took the truth with her, and she sealed it in silence. But despite the years, despite the pain, despite the infinite unknowns, Jim Pitson still holds on. Not because he's naive, not because he's in denial, but because sometimes hope is the only thing left that isn't broken. "Until someone shows me he's gone," he says, "I believe he's out there. I have to." In the quiet hours of the night, Jim Pitson sometimes dreams of a knock at the door. In that dream, he rises slowly, almost afraid to believe. He opens it, and there stands Timothy. Older now, taller, changed, but still his son. Maybe there's a pause, maybe a moment of recognition, a breath held, and then a hug so long and deep it threatens to collapse the world around it. But then Jim wakes up, and the house is still. The door remains closed, and the ache begins again. This is the legacy of unresolved grief. It doesn't fade. It doesn't quiet. It only grows more complex with time. In cases like Timothy's, hope is both a gift and a curse. It fuels the search, keeps the lights on in the darkest corners of a parent's heart, but it also prevents healing. How do you mourn a child you believe might walk through the door tomorrow? How do you move on when there's no proof that you're supposed to? Timothy's story has touched millions because it embodies the most primal fears and the deepest questions of the human condition. What do we do with mystery? What do we do with absence? The case has become a cultural artifact, not because of what we know, but because of what we don't. It sits in that rare space where imagination replaces evidence, and where empathy does the heavy lifting the truth refuses to deliver. In the years since his disappearance, hundreds of volunteers, journalists, detectives, and even total strangers have tried to pick apart the puzzle. Some spend hours digging into travel logs, surveillance footage, and psychological profiles. Others light candles, say prayers, share photos online. And some just sit with the story, letting it haunt them. Because whether or not they knew Timothy, they see someone they love in him. A nephew, a student, a son, a little boy who never got the chance to grow up. And yet, the story resists ending. That's what separates it from tragedy. Tragedies have conclusions. Timothy's case is still unfolding, even if that unfolding happens in silence, in shadows, in invisible spaces where memory and possibility coexist. There's still a file open in the Illinois State Police database, still a father waiting, still a nation wondering what really happened in those final hours before Amy Fry Pitson ended her life and took the answers with her. Jim doesn't expect a miracle. He knows the odds, he knows the statistics, but he also knows his son. He was smart, he says. He knew how to take care of himself. He knew how to love. And wherever he is, if he's out there, I hope he still remembers that. In that small sentence lives the entire heart of this case. Not in forensic evidence, not in surveillance footage, but in memory. In the love that remains even when the person is gone. Timothy Pitson may never be found. The world may never get the truth. But his story, and the aching humanity within it, will live on. Not as a cold case, not as a headline, but as a symbol of how far a parent will go to protect their child, and how far another will go to find him again. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing we can do is leave the porch light on, just in case.